Hey, MBA hopefuls, welcome to MBA Waves. My name is Eric Lucrezia. I'm here joined as always by Bara Sapir. Hi, Bara.
Hi, good to see you, Eric. Great to see you, Kritika. Great to see you too, Eric.
And speaking of Kritika, she is a colleague and friend who we know from AGAC. And if you don't know that, AGAC is the Association for International Graduate Admissions Consultants. Hi, Kritika.
Hello, Bara. Hello, Eric. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to see
Thanks
you.
for, thanks for joining us today. And today's topic on MBA Waves is all about campus visits, why it's important, and how to go about it. Some tips for making a successful campus visit. So just to jump in right away, like why is this important? It's really an integral part of your research process. And I realize that for everyone, it's not necessarily easy, time-wise, money-wise, to visit all of the campuses that you're applying to for business school. But even if you do it at a minimum virtually, like a virtual tour is a great way to go about it. Also, I know that a lot of business schools at the MBA fairs, some of them, they have these like headsets where you can do like a virtual reality tour. It's another way to go about it, but it's really also about the people. So just a couple of reasons I was going to throw in why I think it's important. And of course, you guys are welcome to jump in at any point. First of all, checking out the facilities, the classrooms, library, student center, residence halls, if they have any. Second, as I said, it's about the people. So meeting the admission staff, of course, but also professors. If you have the chance to meet with career services or any current students is a great opportunity. Getting us into the campus culture, like what's the vibe like? Do you feel good there? Like obviously if you feel happy, safe, like you fit in there, it's going to play into your success. What else, guys? What do you guys think are other reasons why in a campus visit is so important?
Well, I just want to I want to say quickly that I loved your survey that you had on LinkedIn, which was about this, right? And I started thinking about different campuses. It's campuses, right? Not campusi that I visited when I was looking at undergrad, not grad school. But I do remember I went to a campus and there was a guy walking around with a really big snake at one in the evening. And it was really impactful. Like I thought, that's bizarre. Like it's a small campus. And how do I feel about just some dude carrying around this humongous snake? I didn't wind up going there. And then another campus that I went to visit, another Midwest campus, another small campus, I saw the same people over and over again. Now, granted, this is undergrad, it's not grad school, but how did I feel? Like I marked on your survey that really it's the vibe of the campus that was important to me. And one of our colleagues, actually Farrell, wrote, remember that business school is a very small period of time, right? So you might like the city or the place, but do you want to have short term, like undergrad, you're there for 4 years, right? Business school, you're there a shorter amount of time. So what is going to be important? Is it going to be who you're going to meet and who the businesses that are around you, or who you're going to be studying with? And they both might be super important. But I do remember when I did finally go to the school that I wound up attending, I just felt at home. I felt at ease. I felt expansive, and I felt important. And the same thing happened in grad school. I actually went to the same undergrad and grad school, University of Michigan, and very different experiences completely. But I love the campus. I mean, it's Ann Arbor, but but I do think that it is important. I am harping on this, but it is important to know what your intention is and what the vibe is at the place that you're going to. Krithika, what do you think?
Yeah, as a fellow Wolverine, go blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. No one can beat Ann Arbor, definitely. See, I'm going to chime in from the international student perspective. A lot of the people who come from various other areas, especially to the different regions, are not aware of the grad school, vibes and other things as well, and how the campus is and how important it is. And some people, so there are a few people who actually take the effort to go on a campus visit because it's literally like crossing continents for them and traveling like 24 hours and so on and so forth. But I did like encourage really people who are very serious about it, and who also have the option. So for example, they could always couple it with a work trip that they were doing anyway. They were going there anyway and they could do it, or they were like living in, say, Dubai or elsewhere, and it was very easy for them to just take that trip and make the trip to visit the schools. Always I get this from people, and even when I visit schools myself, the idea is that the vibe is so important. And when it comes to decision making time, they always go for the school that they thought that made them most comfortable. So it's always the vibe that helps them decide. It's not like the cost, it's not the location, it's not like how much salary are you going to get, or like, how many alums were there in the network and so on. And that's why I feel that the fit and probably an understanding of what to expect is how people decide finally on where they want to go for B school. So, and from that perspective, I'm so thankful for all the virtual tours out there. And I mean,
Mhm.
earlier too, we used to have the virtual tours, and I always would say that please go take a virtual tour and imagine yourself being in middle of this building with probably 80 of your classmates or section mates or whatever. How do you feel? Is this where you want to be? So that's a question that I would definitely want people to ask, even if they cannot make the campus visit. I'm so thankful that I mean, one positive thing after COVID has been that there are so many virtual campus visits possible now, like a full-fledged virtual programming that is happening for really interested candidates. So people should avail that, and then definitely take that up and use it for their decisions, deciding on where they want to go.
Students also have the opportunity to sit in classes at some of these institutions and talk to the professors, right? And so that winds up being such an amazing opportunity, because you'll even see, what are the classrooms, what do they feel like, what do the seats feel like, how are the rooms set up. They're probably not all set up the same way. And some will be more like offices if there are seminars, and some will be larger rooms. So you really get to feel like what it would be like as a student when you go to these campus visits, and see how do the students interact with each other, right? Is it contentious or is it collaborative?
Definitely. As a domestic student, so coming from the US, I didn't travel, even though I've been living abroad and working abroad for the last 15 years. I stayed in the New York area, and I visited a couple of the campuses, and where I ended up going, Hofstra University. I remember that day visiting. It was a beautiful day. The campus was absolutely beautiful. I met a bunch of cool people. The classrooms were like modern. There was like some technology in the classrooms, which was impressive. This is like 1995 we're talking, pre-internet, but we just got email, and I was very excited about having an email address for the first time in 1995. And it was about, yeah, the vibe, the connection I felt with people, and like the campus culture. It was impressively, it was impressive on the academic side, but it was also a lot of fun, and that like definitely played into it. So that kind of sums up like why it's important. Now let's pivot over to some tips for making that visit successful, some do's and don'ts. And the first thing I would say is definitely you want to request an appointment, because a lot of schools, first of all, they may only welcome visitors on open house days, certain days or certain periods of the year. So you want to respect that, of course, not just rock up and like, hey, I'm here. But on top of that, the school wants to show you as good of an experience as possible and give you opportunities to meet with some of the key staff and students. So if you just show up and they're not ready for you, they may not be able to do that. Who wants to come up with that one?
Well, another tip, and I do know that there's some listeners that are not just looking at business school, but there's some undergrad folks that are probably watching, and that's also to look at what kind of activities the school, well, when you make the appointment, some of them will set up activities for people who are visiting. That it's not quite an orientation, but it's more like networking, socializing. I know there's campuses that I visited that actually I stayed with current students, and I was able to actually shadow them and see what their life was like. And I think for undergrads, that's super important. I think that for grad school and for business school, it's as adults, we have a different kind of perspective because we've been out in the world. But depending on where you are, I think that that's also a really interesting opportunity. And making that appointment, you can find out if you can do that.
Yeah, for undergrads, when you're like, 16, 17, 18, looking at colleges, I think you even more don't know what you don't know. And it's really like testing something for the very first time. So connecting with fellow students is really cool. Like you have the opportunity to stay on campus, check out the dorms, and see what it's like a day in the life or a week in the life of students. That's a really cool opportunity. But as you said, we're talking MBA level, grad school, know more what you want, what you don't want, what you're looking for. It's like different priorities.
The housing, you bring up housing, and that's actually also super important, right? Because some places have grad school housing that people automatically move right into, and they might even have married and family housing, right? I know here in Berkeley, they have that. And so where would you live as a grad student, and what kind of transportation would that look like in getting to your classes? And so finding out that would be important as well.
You know, for an MBA program, which is it's much shorter, as you said, compared to undergrad, which is 4 years, an MBA 1 or 2 years. You have a very limited amount of time to make those connections. And as we all know, one of the most important things about an MBA program is the network. And so a lot of times MBA students will want to live on the campus for either the first semester or the first year to kind of like force themselves to develop those connections with other people. And then they may want to live off campus for the second part of the program, maybe more in the downtown area where it's easier to get to interviews if they're going, looking for a job in that city or country post MBA.
Yeah, and that brings me to this, important thing. Like, this is where people decide that whether they want to be like in a city, for example, Chicago, Booth, for example, or you would want to be somewhere in Ithaca, in Cornell, right? Or you would want to be in, say, Ann Arbor, which probably has like a mix of both. So this is when people actually like, maybe you're not suited for a certain kind of lifestyle that you get to experience during the period, or maybe you want to explore it. So, and I think that adds to the whole networking that you brought about, because some of them might actually thrive in a certain area, but they might be miserable in certain other things. So that could affect their overall experience. So yeah, that's a great point.
It's so interesting you brought up Ithaca and Ann Arbor, because Ithaca to me feels a little bit like Carytown or Main Street, right? It's just these smaller versions, right? And then you look at a place like Pittsburgh, right, which is completely has this total revitalized feeling to it now versus what it was like, 20 or 30 years ago. And so the virtual tours might not allow you to really understand what the place feels like. And so I do think that you can really get a feel. You can also, when I was looking at schools, I was looking at music venues to see who's playing, right? Who's playing at any given time to know, what am I going to do? What are, the networking? I wanted to see certain kinds of music or go dancing. What was available to me beyond what the university was giving me, because that's a great opportunity to network also, to not just do it in the classroom.
Right. And I'm curious here as to, what do you think is the best time to do the campus visit?
I think that it's really important to visit Ann Arbor in the winter. So if you can withstand it. But it's so beautiful so many other times of year, but the winter in Ann Arbor is so long. So really think about how you feel about seasons, right? Because that had an impact. I thought I hated winter. I think winter is absolutely gorgeous, but I was in Ann Arbor for 6 years, I believe, 7 years. And those winters are intense. So
location is definitely a thing, right? Like, some people choose to do an MBA because they want to be in beautiful weather, or if they like skiing, being where there's snow. I don't know if there's many mountains in Arbor, but definitely gets cold. But if you want, so location is definitely part of it. But going back to what you were saying, Bara, about like checking out the concert venues and who's coming around. I mean, events, activities is definitely something you can pick up by visiting the campus. Grab a copy of the school paper is like a really great way to see what happens. What are people talking about? What's important to them? What events or activities are happening? Is the campus programming board pretty active? Now, this is definitely more on the undergrad side, because MBA students typically have very full schedules and don't have all the time to, jump in and do events and parties all the time. But it's still kind of nice to be part of a community where that's going on around you, and it plays into that vibe, that energy, that it's more than just professional development, but it's like human development. But not only school paper, if there isn't one available, like keep your eyes open, look at the bulletin boards, look at flyers that are around. You'll see things that are going on, and many times there's student associations that are organizing events that could be like professional development, like the consulting club they have, or some kind of club around accounting or finance, marketing, that may be helpful. You'll have opportunities to do additional projects, learn things, connect with people, again, network, right? So also, before your visit, I wanted to say, as always, do your homework, right? Before you visit the school, look at the website, take away as much as you can, download the brochure, the careers report. If you know the names of some of the people you're going to meet, look them up on LinkedIn. They're very likely doing it to you, and it's totally normal and acceptable. I know some people are paranoid about, like, oh, they're going to see that they're my opinion, well received as like, this person's doing their homework, this person's interested, they care. It's a mark of professionalism, I would say, that you're active on LinkedIn. So you can see, for example, if you know you have an appointment with the career services director, good on you. That's great. Check him out on LinkedIn. Maybe it turns out you have some people in common. Maybe you come from the same place in the world. Maybe you even went to the same undergrad. And having those common points is a great way to make connections and build and also be memorable, by the way, if you're still waiting for that admissions answer. So Kritika, you asked about I think it was Kritika who asked, when is the best time to visit? And I wasn't thinking seasons as much as I was thinking where you are in the process. Like if you're like a year or two in advance of actually applying, or you're like in the process, or it's after you've been admitted. And I know for a lot of people, it's going to depend on circumstances. Again, time schedule, money, whatever. But yeah, it's a good question. I think you'll take away different things from your visit depending on where you are in the process.
Yeah, like, and I would say
It
that
could be about help.
Right. So go ahead.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Kritika.
Yeah. So I would
No,
say that
after you.
if it depends on, yeah, I was thinking about like when should someone visit depending on their stage in the application process and where they are. And sometimes I feel that it is really, really helpful, especially when they have to take decisions, or like when they have to like probably like, start thinking about where they're applying. So when it's either shortlisting or when they have to like make like an admit decision. And of course, like all the schools have like admit weekends and other things that can help them get started. So personally, I would say that when you have to take a decision between, say, a couple schools and you're torn, deciding like where to go, taking a virtual tour or definitely visiting the campus might be like the best way to break it.
Absolutely. There's a comment that just came in from our colleague and friend, Marlena Corcoran, who's also an admissions consultant, who says she visited Ann Arbor on a day with 50,000 people flowed toward the football stadium, which is a very new experience for her. Now, I know football in the Midwest is huge. And I understand you guys went to the same school. You both were at Michigan?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know
Yes,
each other?
and I think and just like that's just like half the capacity of the stadium.
Yeah, it's quite astounding just to have so many people walking towards the stadium, and it's just these waves and waves of people. There's so much school spirit also, right? And there's tailgating, and so I can imagine that it's a very different experience than a small school somewhere, or a city school, right, where you don't have everyone on the same page on that day, or somewhat on the same page.
And all of that is, by the way, a very, I would say, North American kind of experience, the collegiate experience compared to Europe and other parts of the world. Yeah. They don't have that same kind of school spirit thing, which they're kind of trying. Like a lot of schools that I've worked with in Europe, for example, have seen the American model and culture and try to sort of emulate that. And it works really well to create a certain pride. And in the long term, it's about creating an active alumni community who often may want to donate if they have the money. So yeah, it's really a phenomenon. And American students, perhaps Canadian as well, should keep that in mind. If they're looking at schools abroad, what kind of experience they want to have, if they're really looking for that, I don't know how to say it, like a campus pride experience that may or may not exist depending if you leave the country. And, non-Americans should be ready for that. If they're coming to the US, that's like a really big part of it. Maybe Kritika has that experience.
I was taken, Eric, by our conversation last week with Cambridge Judge when they were talking about the places where they would have dinner or the places that they were. So it sounded similar to Yale's dining areas, and it sounded incredible because they had these formal dinners once a week. It sounded like, where people were really getting dressed up, and that was part of the culture. And the student that we spoke with talked about these different circles of people from the different houses that they were connected with. And so different schools are going to have a different culture within the school itself, where you might actually get to meet other students there, not just the students that are in the business school, but that are in different departments. And how it just seemed very eclectic and super interesting that they had this tradition.
Absolutely. Was to get prepared. Like, definitely want to update your resume /CV. Make sure your contact information is for sure up to date, but try to have everything, all your recent recent experiences included, and you probably want to bring a couple of printed copies of your resume with you, just in case you're asked. Sure, most things are digital these days, but sometimes you might run into somebody on the campus that, you get to talking with them, and they might be interested to see where you've been at with your career so far, and it can be helpful. So be prepared and be the hero of the day and be ready with the copy.
And you can even get a QR code super easily, right? Get a QR code so folks can actually get your information really quickly. That's another nice thing to be able to do fast.
Yeah, I've been seeing that. It's funny how they came like a while ago, and then they like just disappeared in popularity, and now they're like back again. Like a lot of people are using the QR codes, and I've absolutely seen that on CVs, on business cards, on brochures for schools. By the way, you can flash the code and download it rather. What were you going to say, Kritika?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, Eric, you mentioned that you want them to be memorable, and I want them to be good memorable, so that like they don't ask like the usual, oh, like what's your class size and things like that they could have already like asked before. And I would also say that they should treat this a little bit more seriously, in a sense that just like how they are judging the program, all the people that they interact with will also be like judging them, and this can also be like a way of evaluating their candidacy as well, like just the same way that they're probably like considering the school. So I would just say to behave professionally and not to think of it like think of it like an informal setting, even though people are going to be like extremely friendly and of course like very nice about it, but to also like think of it like another possible way of an evaluation rather than just being like an outing.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to take it seriously, which brings me to my next point about like dressing the part. Like, of course, usually it's not a formal interview when you're visiting the campus for the first time, but of course people are making assessments. They're taking note of how you present yourself. So while you don't need to wear a 3-piece suit, maybe you shouldn't wear like jeans and a hoodie, because people are gonna be like, you don't take this very seriously. So, it's small things, but people take note of it, and that will have an impact on the impression that you've made and perhaps the ultimate admissions decision. So definitely want to dress the part.
And no Zoom wear.
Idea for an MBA program, definitely like business casual is a good idea. Sorry, you were saying?
What do you think?
And no Zoom wear.
Zoom wear.
What is Zoom wear?
Zoom wear will be like where you're casually dressed in the bottom. That kind of
no jammies. No jammies for the campus visit. What do you guys think about thank you notes? What do you think about thank you notes after you meet people? Not even just email ones, but like even handwritten. I'm a big fan of handwritten thank you notes.
Totally. Nice touch of class. I mean, look, everything's digital. We all get emails with bills all the time, or like annoying, stuff. Like a handwritten thank you note is a nice touch of class.
I think so.
Yeah, but if not a handwritten one, definitely like at least an email one. I think that's kind of the least that someone could do, especially for, say, if there was somebody who escorted them, or if there was like a student-led panel that they were part of and they met the other students. So I think a thank you note is definitely in order.
You theoretically could even bring things when you do have, like, you can even bring some candy or something nice to drop off if you're going to be meeting with people. Like little boxes of chocolate, like nothing extravagant, but just something sweet. I love that you mentioned, Kritika, that it should be like a positive, memorable experience, right? So it is.
It's interesting. A lot of when I used to work at ESSEC Business School, a lot of the students who came from Eastern Asian countries would bring gifts, which is so much in their culture, right? Gifting. And actually, it's how important the gift wrapping is, perhaps even more important than the gift itself, and the way it's presented. There's a real beautiful like formality to that. So we would see that a lot. And sometimes people, in Western countries didn't necessarily know how to take it. Don't want to have anything too extravagant. Don't want it to be perceived as some kind of bribe for your admission. But if that is in your culture and that's something that you want to do, is giving a small gift, a token, or something inexpensive that is maybe symbolic of where you come from, that could be a gesture of thank you for welcoming you onto the campus, I think is a nice touch. But yeah, at a minimum, an email, even better, a handwritten thank you note. And last but not least, I wanted to say one more thing is be on time. Like probably show up early. Like definitely check out on Google Maps how to get there, or Apple Maps if you prefer. But check out how long it's going to take, method of transportation, maybe even have some like local currency cash in your pocket in case you have any hiccups. Plan to show up a little bit early, but not too early. Like 15 minutes early is good, just so you're there, and then you can walk in the door like just on time. If you're late, of course, that never looks good, and you might actually have a kind of ripple effect on other people's schedules who've been planning to meet with you. You wouldn't want to do that. Plus, and perhaps most importantly, you're going to miss out on so many opportunities. If they've scheduled a nice day for you, which we often did for students coming or candidates coming to campus to visit, we would set up like a lunch with current students, meetings with various people, a tour of the campus, visit to the residence halls. So if you come late, you're going to miss out on things. So definitely want to be on time, if not a little bit early. Anything else to add before we wrap it up today for MBA Waves?
Just want to mention that we've talked about interviews before, and they're checking you out and you're checking them out, right? And so there is that it is a two-way street. So take note if people wind up showing late for you. Take note if people don't. It's all information for you to figure out like what is acceptable in this particular culture. And also you're only there for a short period of time, but you might also want to see what's happening politically in some of these places, because those could have a big effect. At least in the United States, it could have a big effect on your life at this point. So you might want to keep that in mind.
That's really good. Like if you're visiting from abroad as an international candidate, it's a good idea to be up to date on the current events in that country. So you might be a little bit more sensitive in the certain things that you talk about or don't talk about, like if they've had some tragedy happen. Seems to be a lot going on in the news these days, but being aware of what's going on is definitely to your credit. So maybe shape how you speak, but as I think what you may have been alluding to, Bara, is maybe avoiding some situations that you might not want to be part of also, in case that something is going on in that particular country. A really interesting point coming in from Dr. Marlena Corcoran, bearing in mind, it is against the law for faculty to accept gifts at a state university. So yeah.
So interesting.
In the US, yeah, that can be a thing. So it could be a good idea to talk to some current students, like most of the MBA programs, and by the way, undergrad or master's programs have on the website student ambassadors. And if you have any question about, an idea that you might want to bring a gift, you could always ask them what's okay, what's acceptable, and so forth.
Right.
She's come up
and
with
I just wanted to add.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I just want to add like one quick experience of an international student of mine who did this. What international students could do is to combine their campus visits, especially abroad, with possibly like a summer school or some additional class that the school has to offer. So, for example, one of my clients went to Booth for a summer school, and then like used that opportunity in order to to travel to the rest of the programs in the in the East actually, and then actually decided to drop off their dream program before. So they had like a new dream program, after they visit to the place, because certain things that they thought it was very different when they actually went there. So I would say that coupling it with something else, which is like a valuable summer school program or like a class that you want to take up, or even like other things that you might want to do, like would actually like be beneficial for your time, especially when you're doing it before you take the decision on where to apply. And if you're doing it after you want to apply, I would say that at that time you should have made these contacts with these current students and even alums and others in that area, so that it becomes like like a good a good use of your time and not a waste of your time, right? And one more thing I wanted to add is like a campus visit is like a teaser, and not like a trailer. So it's like a little bit more deeper that you get into, and you definitely would want to like take advantage of it.
100%. Kritika, thank you for your comments. Thank you for joining us today on MBA Waves. Thank you for everyone in the audience who watched and listened, especially those who asked questions and shared comments. That's all we've got. Huh?
Especially Marlena.
What was that?
A shout out to Marlena.
Yes. So don't forget to join us next week on MBA Waves, as always on Tuesday. Really interesting topic, really important topic. Foremost, to study the GMAT, which one is right for you. I think it's super important to know which way to attack that behemoth of an exam, which brings fear and loathing into the hearts of men and women around the world as you're applying for an MBA program. We'll have, of course, Bara, who is our resident test prep expert, with some special guests to talk about that. So see you next week on MBA Waves, and thanks again for joining us. Bye-bye.